I read 15 books in the month of June, bringing my overall total to 93 books on the year. We are going to go over the good, the bad, the ugly. In today's video, we're going to talk through the nonfiction and the fiction. Hopefully you find some good recommendations. Let's get to it. We're going to start with nonfiction. We're going to go least liked to most liked. First up, we have the declassification engine. Not exactly what I thought this was going to be about. There's a lot more statistics and computational analysis in this than I was expecting. This was a random, bookstore pickup. I saw it. I liked the title. What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets. If you know me even a little bit, you know that I dabble often in conspiracy theories. You can't really say that these days without getting, some labels thrown on you. But, I do like to think about the grander questions in our society. I went in expecting kind of more of a conspiratorial look at American history. I didn't really get that. This focuses on a project done by the author Matthew Connelly in the Declassification Lab in order to digitize and through artificial intelligence kind of look at the classified documents from the CIA. There is a ton of documentation, so much so that it seems physically impossible for humans to go through that documentation and to allow some of that documentation to kind of come to light so that we as a populace in the United States can know what was going on in the intelligence community. I think that this is a pretty noble goal. I overall think that transparency in terms of governing bodies is a very positive thing to work towards. I did find myself kind of bogged down with a lot of the process that was spoken about throughout this book. It has its interesting moments, but at a certain point, it just felt like the mantra of secrets are bad, we must not allow secrets, kind of gets away from the author a little bit. I think that sometimes you do need to have secrets. Unfortunately, that is the world that we live in. The cynic in me understands that we live on in a global world now. We can't just be, here are the nuclear codes. I don't think that would work out for anybody involved. So at a certain point, we do need pretty radical transparency in governing bodies, especially elected governing bodies, but I think the bureaucracy has kind of spun itself into a position of, well, we're just going to hide everything. Maybe we need to find a middle ground, and I think the project that is being done at the Declassification Engine is a valid one, but reading I don't know, how long was this, 500, 600 page book about it? No, it's only 400. I'm talking bad about Mr. Connelly here. It's a perfectly fine book, 2.5 out of 5. Not enough, deep conspiratorial stuff to keep me engaged, but totally fine. If you want to learn more about the project, I would recommend you pick this book up. It does read pretty quickly, and there's some really interesting information in there. So give it a go. It just wasn't exactly what I was looking for. Next on my list was Artificial Intelligence. This was a Kindle read. I got it from Kindle Unlimited. I'm really loving going through the Kindle Unlimited library and just kind of taking chances on books that I can kind of rent. I think, the library effect of being able to just rent something without having to put real American currency in the line of fire to buy something that maybe you won't love. So I gave Artificial Intelligence a try. It's a treatise. It's a 102 kind of class on artificial intelligence. I'm someone that has a lot of artificial intelligence anxiety, someone who worked in a creative field that I can kind of see the wheels turning. I was a filmmaker. I can kind of see the influence of artificial intelligence on filmmaking. I'm not entirely doom and gloom on the artificial intelligence project or experiment, but I do have some anxiety that it will be a major world event that will potentially remove people from employment, which I would see as a negative thing. This just in, people need jobs. No jobs equals bad. You can take that right to the bank. So I wanted to kind of educate myself. I find that when I have anxiety over a particular topic, what I need to do is drill down and understand it a little bit more. As someone who doesn't have a computer science background, I'm not good at mathematics in any way, shape, or form. Computers, while I understand how to use them, I'm not very interested. To be honest with you, I'm more of a language guy. I'm more of a face-to-face human interaction type person. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about artificial intelligence, and this book gave me that. I think that is its shining quality. If you are a layperson like me and you do not have a ton of background, this book will be a great way to get started. If you are someone who is having a little bit of artificial intelligence anxiety, like I was, I will say that this didn't put all of my fears to bed. I think the author is very clear that there are still dangers with this technology. It's not doom and gloom, but it's not pie in the sky. I found that the author really rode the middle very interestingly, and I think honestly, I wasn't looking for someone to tout the great utopian future that we could have with AI, but I also am kind of tired of the doom and gloom that has surrounded AI since, I guess, ChatGPT in like 2022 first started bursting onto the scene. I'm just tired of it. I wanted a more nuanced perspective. That's what I got. I wanted education. That's what I got. So 3 out of 5. There were some chapters where I was just kind of slogging through it, but that could have been because I was reading it closer to my bedtime and I needed my sleep. But if you are someone who is gripped with the fear of the future, especially with artificial intelligence, I think that this could be a great way for you to kind of get a little bit more understanding, and hopefully that will assuage some of your anxiety. Next up, we had Spy. I don't know what it is with me and the CIA and the FBI this month, but I was really digging deep. This is the inside story of how the FBI's Robert Hanssen betrayed America. I was not familiar with Robert Hanssen in the slightest. Another one that I was just walking through a bookstore and thought, that sounds interesting, let's give it a read. It was very, very interesting. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. I enjoyed my time. Short, sweet, to the point, gives you basically everything you need to know about Robert Hanssen. It's not a, cradle to grave biography that's gonna, be a doorstopper for you, but it hits the highlights. It hits all the points of what makes someone betray their country, what makes someone spy, how they get away with it. This person spied on the United States for, I think, like 22 years for the USSR, and then after the fall of the USSR, continued spying for Russia. It was the audacity of this man. I mean, it goes a little bit into the psychology of Robert, but not super deeply, and I know that probably crosses some ethical boundaries. The author is obviously not a psychologist, so the author is just speculating on the reasons why someone, or even Robert Hanssen specifically, would go into spying. There's some great interviews with some, I think, the FBI psychologists who profiled Robert. So you do get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain into why this person would, do, in bureaucratic terms, the most unforgivable sin. I mean, this is treated as top of the line treasonous stuff. In this country, you could be killed for that. That is a capital offense. In most countries, it's a capital offense. I think in the systems of government, that is looked upon right up there with murder for a lot of people. So knowing that the danger is always there, being a spy, but also the fact that this is a guy that worked in the counter spy unit of the FBI. His job was to catch these spies inside of the FBI. It's a book of cognitive dissonance. This man was a very devout Catholic who also had a porn addiction. He cheated on his wife a ton, but also loved being married. I mean, the duplicitous nature of this human being allows you to kind of, I guess, understand how someone like this becomes a spy and does both things. But it could also be, I think the author did a very good job saying, it could have just been that the man wanted more money. That, at the end of the day, that could have been it. But for me, 22 years of being a spy, of being in the line of fire, for I think a total of $4 million all told, maybe not even that actually. I think it was more like 2, personally feels maybe like you could have gotten a little bit more money. This man was giving top level secrets to the USSR. Feel like maybe you could have gotten a little bit more money out of it. I think it was a really fascinating story. It moves really fast. It's well written. It's short. If you're interested in spies, counter spies, anything like that, USSR relations in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, you'll enjoy this. So give it a go. Next up, we have Cinema Speculation by Tarantino. As I've said before in this video, am a film person. I was working in film. I went to film school. I had fallen away from film a little bit after COVID. I had moved, into different chapters of my life, more focused on fitness, focused on my business. I had just become a parent, but film is entering back into my life. I'm making more of an attempt to see more movies. I'm making more of an attempt to learn how to be a better critic, not just of film, but especially of books, because that is something that I want this channel to evolve into. Not so much real life criticism, but I want to be more informed with my takes and with my discussion on the books that I read and the movies that I watch. I thought no better place to look than a director that I really enjoy, Quentin Tarantino. I enjoy his work. And I think that this book is pretty fantastic if you are someone who enjoys the cinema of the 70s, especially exploitation cinema, action, crime, the nitty-gritty of American cinema in the 1970s, told to you by someone who is thought of as the nitty-gritty American filmmaker of the modern times. Someone who's not afraid of buckets of blood, someone who is not afraid to kind of step on the third rail of language use. I find that pretty interesting and pretty fascinating, and I love the psychology of that. So reading this book that is very much in his voice, it was a pretty entertaining time. I had not seen a couple of these movies, so it was good to kind of work through this book, watch some of the movies, and read some of his thoughts on some of these movies. I will say this is not for the faint of heart. Some of these movies are pretty rough, but if you're somebody like me who, you know, movies don't really affect me much anymore, I think it's a great read. It's a great way to kind of enter into the cinema of the 1970s if that's something that you're looking for. And it's written in a glib, you know, it's written like Quentin Tarantino. It feels like he's giving you a lecture, which I enjoyed. Finally, in the nonfiction, we have what I think of as the top of the line, you know, Roman history book. I'm not breaking any new ground with that. Most people enjoy this book in the same way and give it its highest esteem. SPQR by Mary Beard. As I've said in previous videos, I am more of a modern historian when I studied history in college, so I'm trying to fill in some of my ancient history a little bit. This has been a fantastic entry. I mean, I loved it. I listened to the audiobook version, but I never felt lost. I never felt like I couldn't follow the narrative plot. I felt the sourcing in this. I felt the just deep research that Beard did to get some of these ideas on the page. I felt the speculation, but also the more firm evidence-based claims. I thought that it weaved through those things very, very well. Ancient history books often can kind of take big swings because there's not that great of an evidence base, and most of the time, as archaeology doesn't follow with the history writing, you can kind of start to just guess at stuff. And I think while Beard does that a little bit, she never veers into like pure speculation, and she always keeps it grounded into the evidence that she has found, or that has, you know, kind of the prevailing information that's in, you know, day-to-day life. You could just feel her mastery of the information, her mastery of the subject throughout every page, throughout every word that I was listening to. I really enjoyed it. It really sets the bar for ancient history, in my opinion, especially ancient Rome. I think it's fantastic. I know most people have probably read this. This is a very, very popular book in the field of ancient Roman history. So if you're one of those who is trying to backfill some of the canon like me, give this a go. You will not be disappointed. Okay, it was a pretty tough month for fiction, so we're just going to kind of go through some of these garbage books. I don't want to call them garbage, but in my estimation, they were garbage. I mean, the Housemaid, holy cow, what the heck is going on? This is one of the highest rated books on Goodreads that I've come across. This is a New York Times bestseller. This was pure unadulterated garbage. And you know, sometimes garbage can be good. Like I say garbage as more of a genre than a indication of quality. You know, garbage can be uplifting. Sometimes we don't want to be challenged by the great works of literature. Sometimes we need to read garbage. But the problem was this was garbage that was just nothing. It was just, I found it trite and unenjoyable. And oftentimes I am struck by the fact that I just do not really understand what the masses seem to enjoy. Part of the experiment that I've been going through on this channel is trying to find out what makes people like specific books. So I wanted to read something that is seen as very popular, very well liked, and I still don't get it. So if you liked The Housemaid, please let me know why. Please, if you don't mind, take a couple minutes out of your day. Please comment about it. I'm baffled. Completely and utterly baffled. Next up is Butter. A bit of a disappointment on this one, 2 out of 5. I think if this was 150 pages shorter, that this would have definitely crept up into more of my estimation. I enjoyed very much the cooking descriptions. I thought that the prose works really well. It's very well written. Overall, the story just becomes this cyclical kind of, I guess, interview style with a serial killer that just, after the third interview, you're kind of just like, okay, we get it. Like, we understand what you're trying to say. We understand what the main messages of the book are, but more so, we understand where the plot is going. So please, can we just get to it? And I guess in a post Mindhunter 7, what else? I don't know. All these, in a post true crime world that we're living in, I don't think that you can come to this book with fresh enough eyes to be entertained through its 500-page runtime or read time. I think if it was 300 pages, I would have a much higher estimation of it, because the core of what it is actually very entertaining. It's very well written, but it just drags on for way too long. And overall, I just found by the back 200 pages, I was like, I am ready for this to be done. Speaking of another one that I was ready to be done with, Demon Copperhead, I find myself asking, did Kingslover? I don't know. I have kind of dyslexia with her last name, Barbara. I found myself asking if she was getting the same pay for word that Charles Dickens was getting when he wrote David Copperfield, because this did not need to be this long. We as a society, as readership, we need to demand that editing come back to the forefront of literature. Please, for the love of God. Sometimes we can leave stuff on the cutting room floor. I know it's hard. I know it's very difficult. That was always the hardest part about making movies, was editing and losing some of your babies. But I really think that overall, it will make a better product in the end point. This is a very strong story. This is a very well-written story. You cannot deny the writing talent that this author has. But my word, I did not need 600 pages of this. 400 even would have been fantastic. We would have hit the David Copperfield beats. We would have hit the Appalachian drug story that we were trying to get. We would have been in and out. It would have been done. It would have been much, much better in my humble opinion. Obviously, I am not an author. I do not know how hard it is, but as a consumer, as a reader, as someone who feels like they have a decent grasp on modern fiction, it just feels like more and more of these stories are becoming more and more bloated, and we really just need to get back to some type of editing, some form of editing. That is my plea. I thought it was totally fine, but I thought it was way too long. Next up, we have What Feasts at Night, which is the second in a series. I did also read What Moves the Dead, which I enjoyed quite a bit more, so we'll get to that later. This is another 2 out of 5 for me. This is one where it's short, and I still didn't like it. So maybe there's just no pleasing me. I was just in a bad mood this whole month, I guess. I don't know. I felt that it struggled for not having the same type of scaffolding that the first book has. The first book obviously is based on The Fall of the House of Usher by Poe. So it has kind of the structure that you as the reader know going in. I was a little bit more familiar with that short story by Edgar Allan Poe. So I was able to really enjoy the winking nature of it. I guess I'll just combine both of these. What Moves the Dead, 3 out of 5. What Feasts at Night, 2.5. 2 probably out of 5 for me. What Moves the Dead, I felt had more of that scaffolding like I talked about. It just moves a little bit better. We know a little bit more about it, so we're willing to take more chances. I felt like the characterization of Alex is fantastic. I really enjoyed that part. I really enjoyed just, kind of getting to look at the story of The Fall of the House of Usher from a slanted perspective. I've been enjoying those lately. I've liked kind of authors taking a roll of the dice at something like that. But What Feasts the Dead suffers for not having that same level of structure, and it feels a little bit more aimless. It doesn't feel as scary. It didn't feel as moody. The tone felt a little bit more, I guess, off, for lack of a better word. The tone in What Moves the Dead is dead on, bang on, gothic. I really enjoyed it and was a little bit more let down by this one. So kind of a tough read. I did enjoy the first one quite a bit. If you're looking for a short story that is spooky, but not super scary, but has the tone of a horror novel just nailed down, try the first one. Maybe read the second one too. You may have a different reading on it than I did. Next up was The Devils. I did a full review on that, so we're gonna brush right past it. Click here if you want to read it. I've talked enough about The Devils. Watch this video. Then we have I Who Have Never Known Men. This was a good, not great read. Jacqueline Hartman. I'm really bad at saying the authors. I know I keep saying I'm gonna get better at it. 3 out of 5. I enjoyed this, and then I immediately forgot about it. I'm trying to get better at not just brushing through these books, but trying to sit with them a little bit and trying to really understand what their main message is, what they were even trying to talk about. This was a very interesting premise. A group of women is captured in what we believe to be an internment camp, maybe. We as the reader kind of, especially knowing that this was written around World War II, I, as the reader, I'm not going to put words into your mouth, went into this book thinking that this was going to be some type of internment camp, some type of global struggle. But what we find out as these women break out of this prison is that this is just the whole world. There are groups of these prison camps throughout this whole landscape. And the narrative kind of, it's a road movie, basically. It's these women kind of walking to see if there's any livable town, livable land, to see if there's any other survivors. I thought it was a really interesting premise. I did enjoy my time with it, but like I said, I failed to kind of emotionally connect with it. I found the characterization is kind of sparse, and I really was never able to kind of get in the mind of our main character, even though it is told through first person. So kind of a strange scenario there. I do think that it is worth a read. I thought it was a 3 to 3.5 out of 5 for me. I know that other people will probably connect to this a little bit more deeply than I did. Give it a shot. If you like this book, let me know what you think. Then we have My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I think for some people is unreadable. I had a good time with it. I understand that this tone, this style of, dirtbag woman can be a little off-putting for some people. I know that some people are like, oh, well, we've had 200 years of dirtbag men, so now it's time for the women to get their chance. I get that. I found that this was actually a very contemplative tale about depression, especially depression without suicidal ideation. I find that this book offers a look into someone who is not really looking to end their life, but more so just this feeling of, I need a reset. There's just too much going on, and I cannot incrementally get myself better. I need to hibernate. I need to power down, and then after a set of time, I will be better. And I found that that was a very interesting and different kind of way to look at depression. So that is very similar to my lived experience when I have experienced bouts of depression. I often do not fall into the final solution type of depression, more so just being overwhelmed by the world around me. And then after a set period of time, it can be months, it can be days, I come out of it and I feel a little bit better. My depression symptoms seem to ease and I'm able to go about my day. I found, and maybe I'm completely reading this book wrong, but I found that that was more so the type of depression that we were dealing with. I found that to be very interesting. I do not have a problem with unlikable protagonists. That it seems like most people have that problem. I go to literature and books specifically to be put in the heads and in the place of people that I am not. So even if I don't like the person, if I understand their motivations, if I think that I can learn something from their actions, I am usually able to plug into a book and get something out of it. I know that some people, a lot of people it seems, based on the Goodreads reviews of this book, do not like not likable protagonists. That is totally fine. That's your prerogative. I will just say, I feel like you may be missing out and losing a little bit if you cannot find an entry point into a ton of different protagonists. I find that I get a lot out of reading about terrible people. Maybe I'm crazy, but that's just what I like. We have The Virgin Suicides. This is a 3.5 out of 5. It may creep up to a 4 with more reflection on it. I find myself kind of baffled by this book because it's a very difficult subject to read through and read about, but it is not really told in a tone that is incredibly depressing. It felt a little bit lighter than I was expecting in its tone. It's a little bit more glib. It's told through the perspective of 4 young boys, but it's about the suicide of 5 young girls. And I found that to be pretty challenging. I would have liked a little bit more of the internal narrative of the young women, but I think that that's the point of the novel. The point of the novel is not to understand why these women do what they do. It's more so how these actions are perceived by the community around them. And I think that setting it up to tell it through the perspective of 5 or 4 young men who are kind of on the periphery, but are still plugged into these girls' lives and to the community, it has power. And I understand that, it can be a little off-putting. The main conceit is, okay, now tell me this book through the girls' perspectives. And I also felt that, but I did find value in kind of the observer perspective of this whole thing and not being in the heads of these young women. The book does ask you to ask yourself, why do you think they did this? But I don't think that that is the core message or the core reason for this book. So I found that to be pretty interesting. Overall, it's kind of depressing, obviously, with the subject matter. So, you got to be pretty solid with that idea going in. If that's something that you don't really want to read about, this book is not for you because it is about suicide. So, you got to go into that knowing what you were capable of taking in and understanding. But I enjoyed it. I thought that it asked some pretty solid questions of me, and I found myself asking questions of it as I read, which I think is what a good book can do. And finally, we have Shroud, which was definitely the shock of the month. I am not a huge hard sci-fi person, but I found this to be pretty entertaining and pretty fun. This is my first Adrian Tchaikovsky book, but I will definitely be reading more of his stuff. This is the story of 2 astronauts who are, I guess astronauts isn't the right word. It's very futuristic, so they're space dwellers. They're working on a kind of a research vessel and they get thrust into an inhospitable planet and have to survive. It's your specific, typical human survival tale, but there's just enough outside on the periphery to make it new and unique and interesting. I found that it's got kind of a Rashomon style. It's told through the perspective of humans, and then the same action will be told through the perspective of the aliens that they're coming in contact with. I found that to be very fascinating. I really enjoyed that part of the book. Not a huge wealth of depth to it that usually comes with some of these harder sci-fi tales. There's definitely, what is man's purpose in the universe? There's a capitalist critique in there. There's some bigger questions being asked, but on its surface, it feels a little bit lighter than some of the other sci-fi that I've been reading. So I really enjoyed this. This is probably my favorite book of the month, which it's just a 3.5 out of 5. So that kind of tells you we didn't have a great month. What did you read this month? What did you enjoy? What did you love? If you have any comments on some of the books that I read, some perspective that differs from mine, I would love to hear it. I hope you're reading something very, very good, and I will see you in the next video.